I'm very much like I have emotions and feelings, and then I judge, how to proceed with those emotions or next steps, even when it comes to my career. We can get into the whole 16 personalities, like the INFJ stuff.
Sure. This is all about you, your journey in music. Obviously, you have a big career in acting, but I want to focus on your music, if that's cool, throughout this conversation. And we'll talk about the new record and obviously the big tour you're on.
Yeah, man. I'm on the road, back at it again. It's crazy, man. I'm actually leaving. I'm in Nashville right now, and I've got a 14.5-hour drive tonight to Wichita, Kansas.
You're in Nashville? I'm in Nashville as well.
No way.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I
You
swear
live here full time?
Yeah, I do. I actually just moved here from San Diego. So my family and I moved, and we love it out here. We're south of Nashville, down by Franklin area, but we love it here.
Nice. Yeah, I've thought about making the move myself a few times officially, but I'm still in LA at this point.
Right on. That's cool. Yeah, I was looking at the tour schedule and that you're in Wichita. I didn't know if you were like en route, like having to do this.
Yeah. No, I've had to do those podcasts before where I'm on the road and taking it from the back lounge of the bus going 60 miles an hour.
Sure.
It's never ideal. Yeah.
Rad. Well, awesome. Thank you so much again for doing this. So you're in Nashville now, but originally, where were you born and raised?
Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, so Chicago. Okay.
Proud Chicagoan, born and raised. And then I moved to Los Angeles when I was 17 to work for Disney Channel. I had a gig on one of their shows. And then I have been there ever since. I think it's been 7 years now. And honestly, my acting career is what's still keeping me in LA. Otherwise, I would have probably made the move to Nashville, like I was telling you by now. But I still am in Nashville all the time. Residence Inn is basically my home away from home. I hate to say it.
That's awesome. Do you do a lot of writing in Nashville?
Yeah, all of my writing is done in Nashville. Actually, I wouldn't say all of it. I have a few writer producers that I work with in Los Angeles. I think Paul Duncan is one of them. Theron Feemster, nephew. So there's like a handful of them that I work with, but the majority of them are probably in Nashville.
Right on. So you were born and raised in Chicago. What was it like growing up in Chicago?
Idyllic, if you could believe that. I know people have different opinions of Chicago. I don't know if it's the same city that I grew up in post-pandemic. But I think a lot of cities are just feeling some kind of, you know what I mean?
It's all changed over the past 2 years, right?
Yeah, but really, man, I mean, Chicago is just the perfect version of a childhood that I could have ever imagined. Playing soccer in the alley and the trampoline in the backyard, just an all-American, kind of childhood. And people have asked me before, they say, what was it like growing up in the industry? Just because I got started young and was a young actor. But the truth is, I tell them I never felt like I did. I never felt like I grew up in the industry. A lot of my peers, especially working on Disney Channel back then, might have told you that they did, but I would have never told you that. I went to New Trier High School, public high school, for 4 years in the north side of Chicago. I was taking summer school chemistry classes, just trying to get my credits in before I started a career in Los Angeles. So, I had a community in Chicago, friends and people that I know and love and still keep in touch with. But I never felt like I grew up in the industry. So it's always an interesting dichotomy if people ask me and they assume that a young actor must have had a different kind of childhood, but I had the same childhood that most people had.
I mean, at 17, I would think that's not really growing up in the industry. If you're, 3 and, whatever, small commercials, then obviously that would be a different route. But the fact that you landed the show when you said 17 years old, that's quite, or at least that's when you moved to LA. It's quite a different journey. Growing up in Chicago, though, talk to me about how did you originally get into music?
I auditioned for American Idol in 2012, I believe, on a whim. I was homesick from school one day and scrolling Facebook, like every 13-year-old kid does in the 2010s. And I saw this ad with Nicki Minaj's face on it on Facebook saying, submit your audition self-tape. And I was bored and I was just like, hey, why not? I'm homesick. I mean, in retrospect, probably wouldn't have submitted the tape with strep throat, but I was just a kid. I was like, hey, yeah, I'll sing. So I recorded a video and photo booth of me singing, and I sent it into this submission website. And then 2 weeks later, I got a call from a producer in Long Beach, California, saying that they wanted me to come out and audition for the judges. And I thought it was fake. I was in the basement playing video games, and I called my mom upstairs. I'm like, Mom, someone from American Idol's on the phone. And she's like, hang up.
She's like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hang up.
Yeah. But no, and then I went out to Los Angeles, and it was a real deal. And I auditioned for the judges. And ironically, I thought that was going to kickstart an early music career for me. But it was actually the contrary to be true. Ironically, it kickstarted an acting career for me. And I don't know if that was just because it was a reality TV show and I was in front of the cameras, but I got pretty comfortable around the cameras. And so I had the idea as a young kid, just, taking acting classes in high school. Well, what if I auditioned for like an agency in downtown Chicago, which is in my backyard, and try to do stage plays or local productions? So I did, and I got representation, and I started to do stage plays at, like Steppenwolf Theater, which is Gary Sinise's theater. John Malkovich plays there sometimes. Chicago Shakespeare Theater. I was doing Shakespeare when I was 16. So I was kind of dabbling in that in Chicago. And then eventually I got some roles on Chicago PD, Shameless, some of these local Chicago productions. And when I had saturated the Chicago market, I decided I was going to move to Los Angeles and just pursue acting full time. So I kind of put music on hold and assumed, well, if it's meant to be, it'll come back around. But right now I'm getting great opportunities and jobs in the acting industry. So I'll keep that going. And I got out to Los Angeles, booked my first role within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I had an Airbnb booked for 3 months, thinking that I wouldn't book anything. So when I had to go to shoot in Vancouver after I did, I was using the money to basically pay for the Airbnb that I had booked for 3 months.
Was anyone staying in it? Were you like telling your friends and family members like, hey, I got this Airbnb.
Yeah.
Do you want to crash?
Yeah. I had a few friends from high school that flew in to spend some weekends in LA. So, it was kind of like a fun time. It was like a glorified slumber party, if you will.
Sure. That's so funny.
Yeah. And so then after that, Disney Channel had been seeing dailies from that movie that I was doing for them in Vancouver. And they said, hey, we think you'd be good for this role. Do you want to come in and screen test for it? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? So I flew back to LA. The show was called Summer Camp, which turned out to be Bunk'd, which is actually still on the air, if you can believe that.
Yeah, my son is actually he was a big fan of Jesse, and then when it transferred into that, he still loves the show. I didn't tell him I was talking to you today, but I'm gonna rub it in his face when he gets home from school.
Yeah, awesome. Let me know what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I shot Bunk'd for 2 years, and this character that I was playing was a singer. So I started taking guitar lessons again, and which Disney paid for. God bless them.
That's awesome.
And I just fell in love with music all over again. I was like, if there's a way that I can turn this back around to a music career and still do what I want to do here with the acting, then that'd be great. So eventually that did happen. And I did another musical movie for Netflix a couple of years later after I left the show. And that led to a deal with Capitol Records. And so now I'm here on tour and promoting this first EP. So
amazing. So amazing. I want to rewind a bit back here, if you don't mind. I'm just curious, so you see this ad on Facebook for, American Idol. You obviously had singing ability. I mean, prior to seeing that, you must have known that you could sing. And did you play an instrument prior to that? Or was it like, hey, I could probably sing, let's just turn this thing on and let it rip? Or were you doing videos prior to that or anything like that before?
I knew I could sing.
Okay.
And I actually put the time and effort to write a song in high school and get it produced by like a local Chicago producer. And I put it on iTunes at the time. So I don't know, maybe it was always in me that I had this kind of hunger for putting music out there. So I knew I could sing. I dabbled in guitar, dabbled in piano, took choir, took music theory in high school. So yeah, it was always something that I knew I could do. I just never really had the opportunity to do it until then. And the thing about American Idol, I was so excited for it at the time. and it was such a big deal. And all my peers were like, dude, that's so awesome, you know? But in retrospect, it was very much a stepping stone. You know, I'm very glad that I didn't have a career that was super affiliated with American Idol, or that I made it too far so that it kind of stuck with me with the branding a bit.
I've had this conversation with people before, and it's really interesting. I wanted you to continue that, but
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. And so like, even when I moved to LA, I got a buddy named Jared Ang, and Jared owns Just Jared, and which is a publication. And he was talking to me about my career and stuff. And I was like, you know, do we want to talk about the American Idol thing? And he's like, Kevin, you should be glad that you got kicked off that show when you did. And I was like, you know what? From a publicist's point of view, he's absolutely right. I'm glad I did, because now it's more like something that people know that I did, but it hasn't been a career defining thing for me. I've been able to do bigger and better, and I hope to still do that. You know, it's kind of the same dynamic with Disney, that you get affiliated with the brand. But luckily, I feel that I've been having somewhat of an easier time transitioning into adulthood.
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely heard the story of, you know, American Idol not wanting to be just known as, oh, you're the guy from American Idol, or and you kind of get into that world. And it's interesting because I was just doing research on the season that you were on, and I'm like, I don't even know who this person is that won. You know what I mean? Like, it's so horrible to say, right? But it's like so true. It's like there's been so many. If you think of like all the people that have won American Idol, how many of them really even have a career to this day? And hey,
it's not a bad thing. And if you can, you know, get far on the show and still have a career afterwards, then that's a win in my book.
Sure.
But you know, it's funny. Maybe like 5 years after that, I befriended a man named Chris Lithgow, and Chris is a theater producer who had asked me to come in and do Peter Pan for him. Which I did at the Pasadena Playhouse one year. So I got to know him, and his father is Nigel Lithgow, who is the, I don't know if he's executive producer, creator, something of American Idol, but he's heavily involved.
Super high up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just having a candid conversation with Chris one day at the theater. I was like, you remember I was on your dad's show, right? And he was like, I do remember that. You know why you got kicked off? And I was like, why? And he said, because you were under 18. No one under 18 can be on a live show. So I was like, that's why? He's like, yeah, man, reality TV. You can't work those labor hours in the union.
Interesting.
So I don't know if they have exceptions for that, if they really believe in someone, you know, like Jordan Sparks or something, who was 17. But I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. So I kind of got like the inside scoop as to what really went down, and being able to work for the Lithgows afterwards, and you know, end on good terms was I love those guys. They're the best.
That's crazy. Okay. Well, okay. So we talked about your acting career, and then you did this musical that was on Netflix, and then that kind of led you to where you are as far as being signed with Capitol and all of that. But like, when were you writing songs in between here? Like, when did you start? You said you wrote a song in high school, but was that something that you revisited when you were, you know, acting a little bit, or?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I wrote some songs in high school, but I really started to take it seriously during my time on Disney Channel. So I would rehearse 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week I would shoot on Thursday and Friday for this show. And every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I worked with a writer producer, to write and record after rehearsals and shooting days. So I kind of hired him as my in-house personal producer, and he was helping me develop my music and my songwriting skills. And I just kept, you know, writing songs with him. That lasted maybe 2 years, and I had, by that point, quite the repertoire of songs. I don't know if they were any good, but it definitely helped develop my songwriting skills. And I wouldn't trade that time, because it was absolutely what I needed to be able to write the music that I'm writing today. So I kind of went through that, you know, developmental songwriting period that most artists go through, try to find my sound. And then the music started getting better and better. And eventually it got good enough that I was like, hey, maybe I could start sending this stuff to labels. So I sent some demos to Capitol, and they loved the stuff. And they knew that I was already doing stuff in other facets of my career. And so they brought me on and signed my artist and publishing, and I've been writing songs for them. And you know, the first group of songs was the EP, and a lot of those were written during the pandemic, so during the stay-at-home order. So, you know, all these themes of light and hope and inspiration, positivity, whatever it is that you hear on the EP, all just felt really relevant in timing. And like these were the group of songs that I was supposed to release, and I'm glad I did, because even seeing the response on Winter Jam when I sing "It's About Time," the lead single, man, people are going crazy. I mean,
that's so awesome.
It's been out for like 2 weeks and they're already singing it out in the crowd. So to hear that for the first time is just, it's really rewarding. And I'm just happy that they're responding to the EP so well. I think, you know, this group of songs is definitely the most proud work that I've done to date.
Wow. I'm sure that's got to be such a different feeling. I mean, being on a TV show, you're not really getting the immediate, you know, response from people. There's not a crowd of people like cheering you on. I mean, I don't know, maybe you should in front of a crowd, but as what you do, like Peter Pan or something, you would get that kind of immediate reaction. But you wrote these songs, you're going out and singing them and having these fans in this crowd sing them back to you. That's got to be a totally different emotion, I would think, on stage.
It's totally different. You're absolutely right. There's something about instant gratification of hearing like a crowd's response, or you know, after a play, you know, the people in the audience starting to clap, that you know you've done good work and that they're supporting you. But you don't really know that with music until people hear it for the first time, and until you put it out there. And by the time you actually put it out there, after writing it, recording it, you know, mastering it, mixing it, I mean, it could be months since you first wrote it that people are finally hearing it. And at that point you get, you know, demo-itis. You start to second guess it. Well, is this good? You know, because I've been sitting on it for 6 months at this point. But then to hear the response that people have once it is finally out there, and see that they enjoy it, then you know you did good work. And luckily that's been the case for me.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I'm real quick on the project that you kind of, or hiring this person to kind of help produce while you were also working on the Disney show. Was that kind of like a passion project, or it was just something you're like, you know, I really want to start writing songs. I've got this stuff I want to get out. Like, how did that even begin?
I think it started from a passion for music, and a passion for creativity and creative expression. But I think it was more so a logical, rational next step that I knew I had to take in order to achieve some of the goals that I was hoping to achieve later on. And that's kind of the way I think. I'm very much like, I have emotions and feelings, and then I judge, you know, how to proceed with those emotions or next steps. You know, even when it comes to my career, we can get into the whole 16 personalities, like the INFJ stuff.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure I'm like an INFJ or something, which is like the rarest personality type, if you can believe that, like Al Pacino is and Taylor Swift. I don't know why, but for some reason I have a very quirky personality that involves a lot of thinking and then logical, rational next steps in getting things done. And that's kind of the way I've always worked. And I think what has helped my productivity and motivation and actually me getting to this point. So for me to kind of go through that writing period of just developing my songwriting, it felt like I knew that I needed to go through that, passion aside, in order to achieve my goals, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. For sure. And I mean, obviously Pacino, Taylor Swift, some of the most creative people there around, right? I mean, and hardworking people around as well.
I guess. Yeah, man, I'm into the whole like 16 personalities, Enneagrams, astrological signs, zodiac. I don't know if you are.
No, what's funny is like I never heard of like numerology. Do you know anything about numerology, where your name, you break down the letters of your name into certain numbers and it like equates into this thing? Yeah. I was interviewing somebody about it and they were telling me, and I'm like, this is nah. And I looked it up and there was like a website you can put your full name into and it'll break it down and it starts like giving you feedback on what your number means. And it's reading this stuff, and I swear it was like AI, like going through all my like Facebook page, and, like pulling this information, because it was like spouting all this stuff to me. I'm like, wait, what? How does it know all of this? Like it was bizarre. Crazy, it's called numerology.
Numerology. I'll tell you, there's like a pseudoscience for everything.
Right.
There just is. people look for meaning in everything, whether or not there actually is meaning there.
Sure.
Actually, I will say when it comes to faith and my faith, that is kind of like where I do put meaning. You know, I still have fun with the zodiac stuff, but that's a different thing than like actual solid, grounded, you know, real faith for me, which is also something I'm kind of incorporating into the EP.
Yeah.
I've gone through like such this crazy faith journey that is almost too fairy tale-esque to even, you know, really comprehend. But yeah, that's been another thing that I've been putting into the EP and the music is just my relationship with God. And that's the other thing of considering how inspirational and positive this music has been. It's been cool to kind of put that inspiration, instill that faith and hope in people who need it.
And that goes in along with the tour that you're on too, right? Winter Jam, it's a Christian tour, isn't it? All Christian
It
artists?
is. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and it's cool too because it's such a hodgepodge of artists. You know, so for instance, we've got Skillet, which is they kind of remind me of like Green Day, and I was a
they're
big
like
fan.
more of a rock band, right? Like
yeah, totally. And I mean, it's cool because they're like, I mean, those guys are like John, Corey, Jen, and Seth, like that. They've been doing it a minute, and I'm pretty sure a lot of their albums like double platinum at this. They're like the world's most low key but successful rock band.
Yeah, they've got like Grammy nominations and stuff.
It's nuts, man. And they're just the nicest people, and they've been so kind on tour. So I'm grateful for that. But you know, they do kind of remind me of like the alti post rock 2000s Green Day vibe. So you have, despite that, it's still very much faith music. It's very much, you know, instilling faith and hope in people. But then you have someone totally different, like this guy, Torrin Wells, who is a pop artist, basically. But same thing, like instilling hope, faith in his music. And he has like choreography when he gets up on stage. He's dancing, and he's got like a whole MJ Weekend vibe going on. Crazy talented. And then I'm also touring with a guy named KB, who is a Christian rapper, and it's just the same thing. It's like there can be a whole bunch of variety and genres that kind of umbrella under the faith sort of approach. So I feel like I'm in good company and doing the same thing with my music that they're doing.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's cool how they kind of structure that, you know, giving all those different genres on one bill for everybody to kind of go check out. But
it's like a variety show. It's awesome.
Yeah, right. On your EP, you said you wrote a lot of it during the pandemic. Do you feel like that had any effect on the record, the emotion of the record, or?
I do feel like a lot. I do feel like we needed to have some more hopeful stuff. I probably would have gone deeper with some of the more vulnerable, melancholy vibes, which I did go into deep with one of those songs over and over again, which is the fourth song on the EP. And I was kind of going through an existential crisis during that whole time, you know, because you're reading about it so much and all these people that were passing away. And I had dealt with grief before and you know, recently lost people. And so I just felt like it was so relevant and the world was hurting. So had I kind of led with those emotions in the writing room, I probably would have had more songs like Over and Over Again, because that was one song that I actually did lead with that kind of melancholy vibe and put it on the EP. But I purposely stayed away from that just because of the timing. And I was like, I'd so much rather have songs like Wildfire or It's About Time that are more anthemic and just feel good, joyful songs that, you know, you could hear on the radio, and they're just party songs. And part of what I think is so cool about It's About Time, the lead single, is it takes an otherwise heavy subject and turns it around into something super positive. Because if you look at the lyrics, really it's saying like it's about time and how we spend it, because you only got so much of it, and then we all keel over by the end of the day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to turn it around into something kind of fun was just totally unexpected, because in the writing room it could have easily taken a more melancholy, you could even say sad vibe, but I also got to give it up to Walker Hayes and Jordan Sapp, for kind of steering the ship on that and saying, I think we can still talk about those things, but make it into a fun pop song. And that's what we ended up with. So it couldn't have gone any better. I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah, I think people need the uplifting stuff, especially after all of what you know, humanity's been through over the past couple of years. Instead of like continuing down the like we're really sad rabbit hole, it's like, yeah, here's some songs that kind of can uplift everybody.
Is exactly, man. Absolutely. We just needed it, you know. I mean, there's always something going on. Humanity can tend to be
right.
a travesty at times, but at the end of the day, you know, I think through all the noise, we should all just be happy to be here. And life is such a gift, and it's so fragile. So to be able to talk about that on the song and the EP, and we need to have the more somber and humbling realization that really the fact that we're here is a miracle. And we need to make the most of every day, almost not to be too carpe diem cliche, but when you get into the swing of a routine or caught up in daily life and seemingly petty things, which we blow up to be way bigger deals than they actually are, and we tend to forget, you know, the bigger picture of life and the things that really matter. And for me, kind of stepping back and coming to terms with my own mortality and having those realizations, like, why am I worrying about something so petty? Or why am I putting all my energy into something that at the end of the day is completely irrelevant? I think that grounded my faith a lot too, and brought me back to what was important in life. I think we all need that.
Yeah, I completely agree. On real quick on releasing, you know, music for the first time, putting a song out, right, that you wrote and you're releasing, like, did you feel like you were going to get any, you know, lashback, like, you know, people going, oh, you know, you're an actor, now you're going to put songs out. Like, did you have that, you know, conversation in your head at all?
I thought about it, but the conclusion I came to was no. I wasn't expecting to have, and I could have easily, you know, I mean, it's a totally fair question, but I think for me, it's just always been part of my identity that I was as much a musician and singer and artist as I was an actor. It's really just the acting worked out first by chance. So, and people ask me, they're like, well, do you consider yourself more an actor or a singer? Do you like singing or acting better? I'm not crazy about those questions because, I mean, people can have more than one career or hobby and still kind of it feed into what they are doing. And I never felt like I needed to choose one or the other. And at the same time, I didn't want to sacrifice one for the other. I mean, there's no reason why I can't, you know, keep working in films and actively auditioning and taking roles at the same time that I'm writing music on the days that I'm not doing that. So it's really just a balancing act for me, and just another branch and facet of my career. It's like the Justin Timberlake effect, you know. I mean, the guy does Palmer for Apple TV and does his film, and then goes on tour and does his Man of the Woods tour. So you know, it's been done before, or J-Lo. So you know, for me, it's just another facet of my career that I'm finally developing.
I love that answer, because I was going to say you could always just be like, well, you know, I auditioned for American Idol before I even had any like acting thing going on. You know, obviously that was kind of the inclination, like, oh, I want to do this. And that was, you know, songwriting, music based. And then that kind of just fell into when you got back to Chicago, a agency and doing more acting stuff. So it was like you started in music.
Yeah,
a lot of people
I did
probably realize that.
They don't, because really it's just when my acting career kind of blew up a bit, and then I became known as an actor just because I was, you know, currently relevant at the time doing the TV show I was on. That tends to be how it works, is, you know, no one hears of you until you do that role that you finally gain the public's awareness.
Right.
So by that time, they're like, oh, well, we assume this guy's an actor because this is the first time we're hearing from him. But really, I mean, you know, I was doing it well before then. So it's the same thing.
Yeah. It's like when you said they asked you if you're a childhood actor, you know, growing up in the industry, you're like, well, I didn't, you know?
Yeah. People just have all these, like, it's a lot of assumptions, man. Yeah. Exactly. It's a lot of assumptions. And I think part of it is just because, you know, the entertainment industry as a whole is such a public sort of, it's just a public thing, you know, like you're kind of doing it. Your audience is the global public to an extent.
Yeah.
So it's really who heard of you from which press release, who happened to hear that one song you did. So whatever way they heard of you first, that's going to be how they first know you. When really it's just a career that has hills and valleys, and people are going to hear about you at different times or hear your music at different times. But it's just that when your audience is the public, everyone kind of knows you from a different thing or a different thing that you do, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. You could, for Justin Timberlake, if you didn't know that he was an NSYNC, maybe you saw him in, you know, the Social Network or something. You're like, oh, this guy's an actor. Literally, you know, he has this huge Disney career. I mean, yeah, like you said, it just matters where you find him. But
yeah, and ask an 11-year-old kid if they know NSYNC today, and they'll say, like, "Who's that?" Yeah, exactly.
Or
I
the
know
Mickey
Justin
Mouse
Timberlake.
Club,
I saw
right?
him in a movie.
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I love the EP. I love what you're doing. It's amazing. Best of luck on the tour. That's so awesome that you guys do. I mean, you're playing here in Nashville pretty soon. You're doing the Bridgestone Arena, which is incredible.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. So we're also doing some kind of pre-show. I think we've got 150 fans coming in for like a private show somewhere in Nashville during that show day. So I think Lights Down will start at 7 p.m. for that Winter Jam show at Bridgestone. But I think it's like 5 or 5:30 or something that I'm doing a little pre-show for them, and they seem stoked. It's going to be great. Cool. And I yeah, it's going to be great.
I just want to touch real quick on the single. It's About Time. The video, I watched it before we got on the call. I love that video, man. It's so good with the Breakfast Club theme to it.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Yeah.
You enjoy the videos? Since
I mean,
obviously you're used to being in front of a camera.
Yeah. I kind of like to put a little, you know, take what I know from acting and put it into these music videos. And that's why it was kind of cool to develop a little storyline for this particular video. And The Breakfast Club has always been one of my favorite movies, mainly because it demonstrates growing pains and the experience of actually coming of age a lot better than I think other films have done afterwards. It's like, for me, it's the epitome and the staple film of what it means to come of age. And that's why I love it. And it was also filmed in Chicago. Fun story. The Breakfast Club is actually a term that was used at my high school, New Trier High School, that started getting used, I think, in the late 70s. So if people at the school got morning detention, and then they would send them to the morning breakfast club. And John Hughes, who is also from Chicago and graduated from, I think, Glenbrook North, his best friend's son went to New Trier High School back in the day at that time. And I guess the son was like talking to John Hughes or something about the Breakfast Club and Breakfast Club detention. So that's how John Hughes got wind of it and then wrote a concept around it, morning detention. And that was at least the folklore and the story behind it. Yeah. But I was able to get that fact reassured to me when I did one of my movies in 2015. I worked with a producer named Michelle Manning, who has done Forrest Gump, a couple other films, and ironically was a co-producer on The Breakfast Club. So I asked her, I said, Michelle, is it true what they say that The Breakfast Club is based off of New Trier and that whole story of John and his friend's son? And she said, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
That is so crazy. That's the high school you attended.
Yeah, gives me a little personal affinity to it. So
that's so rad.
I like that film because it reminds me of my own high school experience. I've had breakfast before. Yeah, still going to New Trier. Yeah.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate your time. This has been so amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. I have one more quick question for you. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
My advice would be to always lead with the fulfillment and the creativity. Like always lead with what you love and your passion. Because I think it's easy, especially as a career starts to take off, to get lost up, just to get caught up and lost in the whole logistics of it and the noise and people talking and stuff like that and opinions, which is something I've also had to deal with as my career starts to gain a bit more traction. And it can be a bit discouraging at times, but if anything, I use all my woes and all the good stuff too. And I put them into my music, or I put them into my roles. And I come back to why I started doing it in the first place, which is to act, to sing, to write music, and do what I love. So never forget why you're doing what you love to do. And there's a lot of people who would love to be doing it too. So you're lucky if you get to be able to do it.